So in my last video where I talked about some of the things I love about Canada, somebody left a comment and saying that they agreed with me that Canada was a peaceful country but that they are very stingy with their visas. So I thought today we should look at whether Canada is really stingy with its visas. Let us dive into this video to find out. Hello everyone, my name is Diekola. Welcome back to This Side of Life. And if you're new here, welcome and thank you all for joining me today. So today I want to answer a comment that I got on my last video about Canada being stingy with its visas. I know, some people don't even know what a visa is, but a visa is something that you need to enter a country where you are not a resident or a citizen. And as for Canada, Canada has a list of countries that are visa exempt. That is, you can come from that country without needing to get a Canadian visa to get into Canada. There's a long list of countries that are visa exempt into Canada, and when I look at that list, there's really no African country on that list. So that's I guess is why the person who commented said that Canada is stingy with their visas. So I know many people have visa horror stories about Canada. I have mine. I remember when I actually wanted to come to Canada for the first time, when we were immigrating back in about over 20 years ago, there was no Canadian immigration office in Nigeria that processed immigration visas. So we applied to the UK, and to be able to get your interview in the UK, you had to get to the UK, because back then they used to do physical interviews. I know that these days you don't have to appear in an interview, but back then you had to go and get interviewed physically. So we had to apply for visa into the UK, and we were denied. We were not given the visas, and so we had to kind of tell the Canadian High Commission that we couldn't come for the interview, and so they rerouted our application to Ghana, and so we had to go to Ghana to have our interview done. So yeah, I had that issue getting in here, and the whole process took us 4 years before we could get to Canada. I know these days people take 6 months and 1 year, and I see many people complaining. I'm like, yeah, it took me 4 years. But yeah, things seem to be getting better in terms of the length of time it takes for the process. And also, I've heard so many stories, people getting admission into Canadian universities, even with scholarships and teaching assistant positions, and still they are denied visas. So yeah, I know there are many stories like that. And I also remember when we had a birthday party in Canada and we wanted our siblings to come from Nigeria, they were actually denied visas. And I called the Canadian immigration services, and they were like, well, it's not a right for them to come into Canada. If you want to see them, you can go over to Nigeria and see them. And that really didn't go well with me at all. So we wrote to our MP and we did all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, they didn't give them the visas, and that was it. So yeah, I can understand why people would think that Canada is stingy with its visas. But Canada is a country of 35 million people, and it is a country of immigrants. There are many people from different parts of the world that have called Canada home and that are citizens of Canada today after immigrating from other countries. So I did some research and I found that Canada is number 9 of the top 10 OECD countries accepting immigrants. So, and as you all know, Canada is a country of about 35 million people, so relatively small country. I also found that over the past 5 years, immigration has accounted for 3/4 of Canada's total population growth. Immigration is very important to Canada, and before the pandemic in 2019, over 6 million different types of visas were issued. So Canada does need immigrants, and they do accept immigrants. Why then are people having this feeling that they are stingy with their visas? I think it is an issue of demand and supply. Let me know what you think, why you think Canada seems to be stingy with its visas. But I think it's a matter of demand and supply. There's just so many people that want to come to Canada, and so demand is kind of outweighing the supply. So that's why, because, you know, if you look at it, Canada needs immigrants, they want immigrants, but then there are people who want to come and are not able to come. So I think the gap there is that there's just too much demand for the number of people that can be processed or the number of people that can be admitted based on several reasons. Having said that, I am not an immigration consultant, but I just know that to be able to get a visa into Canada, you need to follow the process. For me, the reason why we came to Canada was because there was a process. Back then, they used to have this criteria by which you scored yourself and then you knew whether you were eligible to apply. And I think they still have it today as well. So the Canadian immigration process is very well defined and clear. And I know these days there is the express entry that some people can even get into Canada within 6 months. There are different types of ways of coming into Canada. There is the wealthy foreigners. If you have over $1 million, you can easily come into Canada through the investment route. You can come as a student. You can come as you know, if you're well educated and highly skilled, Canada is looking for you and you can come in. And I think the problem many people might have with that is maybe their age, because I know there's a disadvantage as you grow older. But if you meet those criteria, you can always apply. And Canada is looking for immigrants, looking for people to come and pay taxes. You know, that is a story for another day, taxes in Canada. But then there's a lot of people. So you have to make sure that you really follow the process and make sure that your application stands out from the rest. So having said all that, how do you ensure that you give yourself a good chance of getting a Canadian visa? I will just go through a few of the things that I have found and I've heard from other people as well. So the number one thing is the process is very document heavy. So they ask for all kinds of documents like bank statements, schooling records, English tests. There's so many videos on YouTube that talk about the details of getting a visa for Canada or immigrating to Canada. So you have to be on top of your documentation. There's really no interview, so everything depends on the documents that you present. And you have to make sure that all your docs are in a row with your documentation and that everything is in line with what is required and that all the documentation are aligned. You have to have finances to back yourself up. That is very important. You have to be able to show that you can take care of yourself when you come to Canada. You are not going to overstay your visa and you are going to go back to where you're coming from. A lot of reasons that people fail to get their visas include unclear reason for their visit, insufficient assets in their home country, and then ties to the home country. And one of the big things is insufficient funds. So you have to show that you have enough funds that you can take care of yourself for the length of your stay. So if the money you have is not going to be enough for your stay, then that's a problem. Some people, it's because they lack travel history, lack of supporting documentation, like maybe your host needs to send you an invitation letter, you know, lack of legal status in your home country, and of course, criminal or medical inadmissibility, like if you have certain medical conditions or you have criminal records, because you do have to do a police report. Make sure that you send everything that is needed so that the visa officer can make the decision based on everything that you've provided. And sometimes the process is also very subjective. The visa officer is a person. The same documentation can be looked at by two people and two different outcomes can come out of it. And the most important thing that you need to prove is that you will not end up staying illegally in Canada beyond whatever visa that you are given. Of course, if you are given a permanent resident visa, then you can stay for as long as you want. But depending on whatever visa you are applying for, you have to be able to prove to the visa officer, that particular visa officer that will look at your file, that you will not overstay your visa. And in the case of a permanent resident, that you are really qualified to be a permanent resident based on all the criteria that they have. So yeah, a Canadian visa might be a little bit difficult to get, but it doesn't mean that you cannot get it. I guess what I'm just saying in this video is that make sure you do your research, make sure you do your assessment, and you are qualified to come into Canada. You can go to the immigration website. All the information you need, you can find there. And make sure you get your documentations together and pray. If you want to come to Canada and you have everything ready, you have your documentation and everything, then just pray and that God will touch the heart of that person that's going to look at your file so that they will give you a favorable result. So yeah, so that's just what I wanted to say today. Let me know what you think. Do you think Canada is stingy with its visas? And why do you think that is? Why do you think Canada is stingy if you think Canada is stingy? Yeah, what do you think about what I've said about demand and supply, and why I think there's a problem with people getting visas to Canada? So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Do please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you think. And until the next time, you go out and make it the best days of your life. Bye.